Okay, everyone, we're back with the same fish from the bag of Connecticut river fish that we identified to the herring family, and now we're going to use Hartle, the key to Massachusetts herrings and shad. So I'm following along, starting on page 79 on Hartle, 2002 Keys to Massachusetts herrings and shad. Okay, so we're going to start with number one. The mouth is terminal, the last dorsal ray not elongate, adults with fewer than 75 lower gill rakers. Those are the first couple options. The mouth, if it's not that, the mouth is slightly subterminal, the last dorsal ray is elongated, and adults with more than 100 lower gill rakers. So let's avoid counting lower gill rakers right now. We can talk about gill rakers later on in the class. You will need your microscope or your magnifying glass for that. But let's talk about the mouth. This is a great place to start. It's really asking if it's terminal or slightly subterminal. And so subterminal, if you recall, that's going to be basically a mouth that's protruding down. These are sucker-like fish that are eating algae and things off the bottom. So, if this was a subterminal mouth, you'd have its mouth, when it opened, projecting downward. So this is not the case for this fish. Okay, when its mouth is open, generally it's projecting forward. If you close it, you get a good look at that. Let me zoom in for you. Right, so hopefully everyone can see that where the jaws and lips are here, this mouth is projecting forward. So that would be the first giveaway. You can look at the last dorsal ray as well. This is really something that would be present on something called a thread fin shad. So if you spread the dorsal rays here, the last dorsal ray, so down here, let me get my other tool, spread this out. Okay, so it's not asking about the first, it's asking about this last one. Is it elongated? So elongated would be pronounced. You'd have this last ray kind of feathering out down the back here. Not the case here. They're all relatively even in length, and so they're not protruding or elongated. So I'm going to move to 2. Okay, we have a terminal mouth and no elongated last dorsal spot ray. Okay, 2. Again, asking about gill rakers, but then more importantly, I think, more helpful, is starts to get into questions about the lower jaw. So let's look at that. 2A. The lower jaw is strongly projecting, or 2B, the lower jaw is not projecting. So this may help to see what projecting and not projecting is. What you're looking for in a lower jaw that's projecting is basically a big overbite. I think it would be an overbite, right? So this jaw, this lower jaw here, would be projecting and extending well past the upper jaw, the upper lip there. So when closed, you can see that these line up pretty evenly. Okay, on 2A, hickory shad, you can look up some pictures of this. This lower jaw is going to come way up out here. It's going to just like hook up, be pretty noticeable. This is relatively even, as you can see. So this is not a projecting jaw, and so therefore I'm going to say 2B and move on to 3. All right, 3 is a little bit technical. It asks about the cheek and how wide and deep they are. So 3A says the cheek is as wide as it is deep. Okay, and the outline of the upper jaw is concave. So let me zoom in. So in 3A, the cheek is as wide as it is deep. Okay, and if that's not the case, then in 3B, the cheek's going to be deeper. Okay, this is the depth. Then it is wide. Okay, now you can go ahead and measure this, and so you can go ahead and measure those depths if you want, or eye them up. It is pretty helpful to make measurements. Again, you're looking at the cheek, this portion right here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and measure this for an example. And I'm going to start my measurement here and end it here. It's about 5 millimeters. This is 10, this is 5, these are individual tick marks. Okay, so I'm going to say 5 millimeters for a width. Now let's check at the depth. You can already see that the depth is going to be quite a bit bigger. So top of the cheek, work all the way down to the bottom of the cheek. So here's 5, about halfway. We're looking at closer to 9 to 10 millimeters. Okay, so this cheek is deeper than it is wide, which is going to suggest that this is an American shad. Now, that's helpful, but let's take a closer inspection at the jaw configuration itself, the lower jaw. And we talked about this with the difference between river herring and shad in prior class, but let's really take a closer look at this. Open the fish's mouth, and for the purposes of this, I'm going to remove this fleshy tissue here, so you get a good look at this. Okay, this lower jaw, when I really extend it and pull this out, you can see this profile in the jaw. Okay? This is relatively straight. For comparison, let me take out what I know is a river herring. Okay, a lot of similarities, forked tails, scoots on the bottom, on the ventral side. Similar positions of the dorsal relative to the pectoral fins, but let's open up the jaw now of this river herring. Okay, and when extended, try not to butcher this here. When opened, you can see that this jaw shapes down. Let's move this out of the way. Right here. Every so subtle. Trends down. Okay? So hopefully you can see that in your specimen. But open the lower jaw, and you're looking for that shovel that occurs just at the end here. Starting here, starting up here, ending down there. I need about 5 more hands to make this really clear. But you want to look at this part right in here. It's coming out, drops down. Coming out, shovels down. Whereas in the shad, that's less pronounced and it's relatively straight. Okay, so those are some things to look for. That's IDing this fish to an American shad is what we identified that fish to, an Alosa sapidissima. Okay, let's stop for a minute and pull up I think what we're calling the Devine herring ID sheet. So this is the one with all the different measurements A to F that we were discussing. It might be worthwhile to just review some of those quickly with folks. If you remember, A, we're looking at the snout. We're making a measurement from the snout to the center of the eye. Okay, so when you're making this measurement, I want to make sure you're at the snout. And I like to put the fish on top as one way to overcome kind of battling the curvature of the fish. You can lie it down as best you can. Make sure you can see your tick marks. And so the middle to there, I'd say about 7.5. Okay, you can call it 8 if you want. So I would have 8 for measurement A. Okay, now let's move to measuring the diameter of the eye. Again, that's this width right here. Okay, I'm getting about 7 or so. Okay, so those are the first 2 measurements that you want to make. The next one is the length of the tongue protruding past the mouth in an open mouth. So this one's pretty simple. What we want you to do is open the mouth and look for that tongue. Again, not changing the angle of the fish, just have it lateral to you or broadside, and open the mouth and look for the tongue. And is it protruding past this V opening here in the tongue? In the mouth. Okay, that one isn't, in my estimation. And if I open this mouth, again, more hands would be helpful, but if I open this mouth and use this other tool, the tongue's dragging down with it. But so there's the tongue. It's just kind of sticking to the lower jaw. So when the mouth is open, this tongue is quite visible. Okay, you can just see at the tip of my forceps there. Okay, so you're looking for that protruding. And then, again, D is the steepness of the lower mandible, the lower jaw, where we have relatively flat lower jaw here. And then you have what we're describing as a shovel coming down on this one, on this herring. So hopefully folks can see that. When you're looking at the thickness of the upper mandible, so that's what I ripped off on another fish, but that's this flappy piece right here. Hold that up. Okay, there's the upper mandible. And we just want to look at the thickness of this. So, our codes are 0, 1, 2, but we can modify that to say rounded or squared. But you can see, if you separate that and have a decently contrasting background, you can see how this is slightly teardropped here and not rigid rectangular. Okay, and the last measurement you want to make is looking at the distance between the mandible and the subordinate plate. So again, I kind of took this fish to task here, but the distance between this mandible here, okay, when left alone. And then this plate. So you got the cheek and then this hard plate right here. This is the mandible plate. Okay, so there's a distance between where this mandible starts and this hard plate begins. So you're measuring this distance right here. Okay, we've come to find that one's probably least reliable, but certainly the jaw shape and the tongue is a helpful one as well. So these hopefully make sense to you, but we can talk more about them in class today if you had any questions. But this is something you'll be expected to do. And again, this is really tough. This is tough. These are juvenile fish. It's difficult on adults. And so recognize that this is a difficult family to ID to species. So there are some tricks that can help you along the way to help you ID.